Again, visa trading is known as a free visa problem. It's a situation where a migrant's legal paperwork is valid for a certain position. However, post-entry, once they come into the country, the migrant performs a different job. They're entering into a black market. So this occurs because a migrant worker was deceived by racketeers about which the nature of the job that's waiting for them in the GCC, which has become a problem. So we want to distinguish between that's visa trading, and we want to talk about the difference between human trafficking. So human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, coercion, without paying some type of labor or commercial sex act. This is not visa trading. So it can happen in the community, and victims can be from any age, race, gender, and nationality. Traffickers might use violence, manipulation, or false promise of well-paying jobs or romantic relationships to lure victims into trafficking situations. So this is what happens when people are human trafficked to a place to another, where visa trading is not that. It's where someone is deceived about the work, sometimes knowingly and unknowingly. So that is the difference between visa trading and human trafficking, because we're talking about visa trading more particularly. So why does visa trading actually exist? Like anything, there's a supply and there's a demand for the commodity or the product. So the supply is that you can say Kuwait's currency is very high, and that's why most people prefer to come and work. In the same way, the agents, they have an opportunity to scam people more and more. So when individuals fraudulently establish companies, they sell visas, and then the demand is always there because many people want a better life, and they want a higher standard of living for themselves and their family, and they also want employment opportunities. So that's what people from developing countries and undeveloped countries, there's sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. So we see the equilibrium here, which is something that's known in economics in terms of supply and demand. But anytime there's a supply for something and demand is high enough, the picking point comes where what the willing buyer is willing to pay for that commodity. So moving on, so this is one of the reasons why visa trading exists. So more so, what we're looking at here, you can say in the GCC, is just a part of the international migration situation in terms of when people migrate from one place to another, it's basically, something that's happening all over the world. People go from one place to another so they can attain money. That is why visa trading exists. But the byproduct of visa trading is the fact that the GCC's policies, they allow people to come into the country, but you have corruption, you have deception, coercion, and then you have the desperation. So this byproduct of people wanting to go to better living standards, it just opens the door for the human factors. So this picture pretty much illustrates what you have. You have the sellers who are pretty much taking advantage of the buyers, and they put the buyers who are desperately looking for work in bad predicaments and situations. More so, we've seen in the news here in Kuwait recently that people are now being held accountable for it. So some of the harms here, as we see in the news, there's a issue that just came to light. A Bengali MP just this year, he was sentenced for human trafficking and money laundering. And I won't read all of this, but the whole point is that there was a whole criminal investigation done, and they charged him with human trafficking, money laundering, and also torturing people from that company because they had complaints from those workers. Also, they arrested or accused one of the MPs. He cooperated with some of the locals on this, and they were also accused in the case. Another case on the 1st of December, where people came to Kuwait basically looking for a halal, legitimate livelihood, where someone from Egypt who brokered to sell visas and bring the workers under his sponsorship under fictitious company. He later fled back to the country after the COVID-19 crisis, but he was arrested after hundreds of workers whom he conned they had filed lawsuits against them. So this would happen, when people are making fictitious company, you have desperate people who want to come and work, and this is what happens. So the harms of visa trading, they create a lot of different problems. This is just some of them. They create a black market where migrants, they surrender their legal rights and protection. The public medical services, they suffer. Financial loss is incurred, emotional distress, and many businesses, they lose out on this. So from this black market, many of the consumers that actually obey the law, if you have a company and your company is doing the right thing, then it puts you in a tough predicament. And also from a government standpoint, they have to utilize all their resources to fight visa trading, because there's a lot of implications or ramifications and things that happen after people are in this such situation. So some of the methods used by scammers, and more particularly, we see that people's dreams turn into nightmares. For example, racketeers, they offer someone a job, for example, a domestic worker, that they tell them that you're going to make 800, when you come to Kuwait or any other GCC country, and they end up giving them 300. So they tell them you're going to be a secretary, but when they get here, they end up being a maid. So this happens where people are scammed. A real life example of a person I know personally. So I want to introduce you to him. His name is Mr. A. We'll just call him Mr. A. Mr. A, he's actually from Chad, and he was born and raised in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. His father passed away. He was left to fend for his family. He had to take care of his entire family. So he ended up coming to Kuwait legally. He came to Kuwait legally. He worked as a caretaker and a driver. His employment ended in Kuwait, and then he returned back to Chad, but he had no job opportunities. So now he's back in a desperate situation. What do you think he did at this point? Because he still wants to work in the Gulf. What do you think this person did in this situation? I would like to get some real feedback on this, because sometimes the human element of these circumstances and situations, we cannot escape them. So can I get some feedback? What do you think Mr. A did?
Mr. A will apply for a visa for any GCC country he wants, or mostly he will go back to Kuwait since he was there.
He tried.
He will pay. If he has money, that's good news. If he doesn't have money, he will lend from his friend, and he will try to do his best to go back because he's desperate.
Exactly. So to your point, he did exactly what you said. And I myself actually ended up participating in helping him, but I didn't know that he was getting scammed. So what happened was he ended up going to Dubai. He had visa paperwork. He had everything with him. He paid the fees or whatnot, and then he ended up there. But he didn't have any money. He didn't have a place to stay, and he didn't have a job once he arrived. So he's now like, I guess you can say he's in a better situation than he was in his home country, but he's still stuck out on the street. And someone has gotten a lot of money from him, whereas he still doesn't have an employment. So this is real life situations that we know about. And unfortunately, it happens. And it's kind of, you have to look at the human element of it, and it's a lot to discuss to see how we can come up with a solution for it. So moving on, just as we know, the average price of a visa could reach up to 2,000 KD. Thousands of workers are brought in, and then, as I mentioned, they're dumped in on streets. And this has increased the number of marginalized workers in Kuwait. And COVID, it revealed this phenomenon. We couldn't escape this when COVID happened, because the state basically had to take care of these people because people were sick, people were quarantined. Now you have to manage all of the people in the country. And if a lot of them, hundreds and thousands are here illegal and they're sick, the government is still responsible for trying to take care of them. And that's what happened during this Corona crisis. So the summary of the harms, real quick, and what we have discovered in our research is the summary of the harms of visa trading that entail corruption and crime, because people are scamming people and they end up doing things that they shouldn't just to get money. Trafficking persons as a byproduct, which can come from visa trading. People's passports being withheld. This is something that's illegal. Also, money laundering, where people are transporting or transferring money to accounts and fictitious companies, and this stuff is happening. Torture and abuse. This happens because people are in bad situations. Also, as mentioned, fake companies are established just so people can, rip other people off, pretty much, and they can be the benefactors of the other people trying to get to another place. And increase the number of marginalized workers. So there's a lot of workers here, as we see them sometimes, they may want to wash a car. We have mercy for them and we really want the best for them, but this is a byproduct of visa trading, when you have a lot of people here who actually just want a better life for themselves. And moreover, as we mentioned, it exhausts the state apparatus, the health services, and it was exposed during COVID-19, during the lockdown. A lot of people who did not have visas legally were put in bad situations. So I like to discuss this with you all in terms of what is the solution for it? Because, there's pros and cons of it, because, visa trading, someone may say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about it. But then maybe you may know someone personally, as we mentioned the case with the Egyptian case where the guy had hundreds and thousands as account, or the Bengali case. There's a lot of problems here, Is there any comments or any feedback that you all want to give on this subject before we move forward? Nothing, okay. All right, well, moving on. And the reason why I put this here is because when I asked the question about Mr. A, and the comment or the feedback was that he would do what he could to get to what he needed to, which was a livelihood. This is the real human factors here, but there's a lot of issues, as we mentioned, the harms that comes from actually someone wanting good. And sometimes those good things that they intend and they want ends up being bad for them because of the circumstances that they're put in. But the benefits of the GCC immigration policies, according to the World Bank, when the correct benchmarks are used, the available data supports the idea of migrant workers benefiting from migration. So, and the GCC is very evident. It's evident that the ease of getting a visa to work in the GCC, it significantly reduces the need for risky methods of human smuggling. So here in the GCC, I would say possibly that visa trading, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but the fact that there's a system in place, whereas in some other countries, because GCC is just one place in the whole of the world. For example, in America, you have people smuggling, people wanting to get in the country, they're doing it illegally. There's a lot of problems there. Whereas here, because there's a system in place, it reduces the need for these risky methods. Or people who go from Africa to Europe, hundreds of people die every year on rafts and boats, makeshift boats, because they're so desperate, they would do anything to go to that country. But if there was some sort of system that would allow for people to get to those countries easier, then it would reduce these deaths. So the GCC immigration is from the most organized in the world, despite of the challenges of visa trading. Despite the fact that the visa trading element is there, it's still one of the best systems in the world in terms of getting into a place to find work legally. And just as anything that deals with human beings, visa trading is a byproduct of it. So also some of the benefits of the GCC immigration policies. There was a report that was signed by 40 of the world's leading human rights organizations. It drew to the fact that migrants in the Gulf make an important contribution to both economies, to both of the countries. So the countries in which they leave and the countries in which they go to. So I believe in 2011, they remitted $60 billion in remittances. This is a lot of money. So moreover, the GCC countries have amnesty periods that often allow the visa violators to legally leave the country. So it's a relief for people who are put in a hard situation. And it's kind of like, it's a good thing because they're recognizing the problem all the time, and it has economic benefits. And at the same time, I think those people who come and who are put in those situations, once those amnesty doors are open, they leave out, and it's somewhat organized per se. But some of the solutions to stop visa tradings from the reports and the data in which I read is to adopt the Philippines migration management model. So Philippines, they signed some human trafficking resolutions with the UN to prevent and suppress and punish trafficking persons. The US Trafficking Persons Report described that the Philippine government, more specifically, that their efforts are robust in preventing such issues. And you should have proper oversight in the sending country. So they said that a lot of the exploitation actually comes from the country that's sending the people. So a lot of the scamming starts in the home country of the person who leaves. So when these fictitious companies are set up, because if there's no way to leave, then they cannot go. But this is what happens with the fictitious companies. So some of the other solutions are to have stricter laws, punishments, accountability, hold all to the standards in the code of law. And just recently here in Kuwait, there was a colonel who was jailed for visa trading. You can establish CSR programs, which they have efforts, these efforts should be made by the sending countries so they can make a way for people to legally leave the countries. And of course, establish real companies with strong partnerships for change, Also, as we mentioned in this conference, is to establish the use of artificial intelligence and technology. So here's some more information in regards to ways to stop it. The Public Authority for Manpower here, they launched a new mechanism to monitor business owners involved in fraud and those expatriates in exchange for money. So they have mechanisms, they have things in place that are, trying to curb the visa trading. And it's something that we always read about here in the news here in the Gulf and also in Kuwait, more specifically. Now, we talked about the solutions in terms of the laws, some of the things that countries are doing. As many of the speakers before me mentioned, they mentioned about how AI benefits recruitment. We mentioned this in the last conference, that recruitment with AI benefits because it reduces the cost in recruitment, creates more jobs, and it reduces the operating expenses, creates cross-organizational business, as well as it removes the human element from the whole process. So it makes sense because it's an automated business process. It's efficient. It saves time and reduces bias, as we mentioned before. And you hire the best qualified candidate, and you decrease the employee turnover rate. So this is just some of the benefits of AI in recruitment. Whereas that is it from my side. Really brief, concise. I think a lot of the information everyone is aware of already. We just wanted to cover it again. And if you have any questions, you don't have any discussions, I'm here to answer. And hello.
Thank you for sharing the information. Thank you for sharing. It's really so informative and very accurate, and it's very real.
Thank you. Yeah, it is.
The only thing I would suggest for the people who are desperate to move on to is they should not actually pay for the visa until they got the visa in hand. They can make this as a condition, or anything that help them, because you pay and you don't know you will have a real visa or not, because they are not all of them educated. They don't know if it's a real visa or no, it's a real company or no.
Yeah, you're right. I think the problem isn't with that. I think the problem is once they arrive to the country which they paid for the visa for, and then they realize that they don't have a real job, and that puts them in a situation to where they are willing to do anything. You know, I mean, we see these guys, and they're doing, you know, odds and ends work. They will do anything just to get more money. So I think the fact that they can get into Kuwait or to any other GCC country easily, it's, you know, I don't know, it's kind of like it's a big issue, and they're doing a lot. So there's a lot that can be talked about on the subject, but I guess the heart of the matter is that they're human beings and they're trying to do the best for their families. And when they come here, it ends up being a burden because of the fictitious companies who allow them to come into the market. So yeah, a lot to be said about the subject. Any other feedback? Okay. Mr. Shamil, I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to
Can
stop
I ask a
sharing.
question?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Abdul Rahman.
Yes.
I know the fact that many people go to certain countries for different jobs and then end up in different jobs. From my how do you call that? From my opinion, all right, as long as the person get into a country and being registered as you know, having a pass to do some kind of a job recruitment, some kind of a job that has been designed. There has to be a registrar in the country, like Kuwait, that make them registered under the job. So if there is going to be a shift of the job, so all they need to what you call to re-register is to ensure that the person can survive under that particular new job, and that the sponsor is, whoever the next sponsor is going to take over, is also responsible to pay taxes or whatsoever. So to me, movement of people can be monitored and administrated. That's my point of view. It should not be burdened by from the recruitment point of view. That's what I meant to say. It's the country policy to register.
Yeah, I mean, I think the policies are there, but I think with anything, just human nature, because there, as I mentioned before, the GCC has, comparably to many countries, they have a real organized system. I think the problem happens is with the human nature in terms of the supply and demand of desperation of people actually, you know, it's kind of like you have a capacity, every country has its capacity limit. And when that capacity limit is filled to its max per se, but then you still have people who want to come in. If those people still want to come in, they're going to knock on the doors. And if there's someone to say, you know, give an example of a stadium or something as a country, if that stadium cannot hold those people, then you're going to have scammers who come and sell tickets from the backside of the stadium, because there's people who want to get in, and those people who scam people, they know people want to come in, although there's a legal way to get in. You understand? There's a legal way to get in, but if something happens inside of that stadium, the capacity for that stadium is overburdened, because it's not supposed to hold so many people in that stadium. So if something happens, whether it be a fire or some sort of safety issue, you know, people may trample one another. It may be a big bad emergency. And this is what we saw in COVID, because there are more people here in illegal status than sometimes than it should be. And what happens is, although they do come in under the legal ways and they're registered as one job. They abscond, they run away from, sponsors, and then they work under the radar. That's what happens in terms of the people here. So once they come in legally, they end up staying illegally, and then they wait for the amnesty periods, and then they go out. Which, how can I? It's a big issue.